I cannot tell you how excited I am to have Ann here today. She is Clea's Global Director.
Hey, Chad, can you hear me?
I sure can. And I was just telling you, just telling the audience how, even though you're kind of new to the business and whatnot, we hope you can kind of muddle through this.
Yeah, well, I'm already muddling.
I was just telling them a little bit about, how we met and the conversations we had and how excited I am to have you here. I'm not just blowing smoke. She just has a wit and a way about her that I could see us just talking about stuff forever. But today we're going to be talking about communications. And we're going to be using the recent deployment of the communications kit for the resumption of cruising as kind of the object lesson. And she's going to kind of explain what's behind that. But what I'm really eager to dive down into is the method behind the madness. Anybody who's ever joined me for a meta session knows that the method is really the thing that matters. Okay, the results will follow method. And so having said that, let me admit a few more people and just kind of pass on over to you, Ann, to kind of just give us a little overview.
Sure.
And go from there.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So let's see if I muddle through this part of it too. So let's just get it clear that I am old. And as I'm looking for this, my son said to me, my son is 31, and he was trying to help me work on Google Docs, which I hate. I hate it because I can't use it. So I said, Ryan, just help me. And you're going to hear about Ryan a lot through this presentation. But I said to Ryan, just help me. Like, what do I do now? What do I do? And he just goes, oh, it's like you're not even trying. So I am trying. I'm trying really hard. I am going to I think I've got this. If I do a share screen, let's see if I've done the right thing here. Do I get?
Yeah, looks like you've started it.
Okay.
But I'm not seeing an image yet. Did it give
You're
me an opportunity to select a window? There it is. There it is.
Okay, but I'm not seeing, I'm on slide 8 and I'm trying to get, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to start up here. Let's start from the beginning. That's part of a good method here. So thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. We can go back to anything you want. And then I know that Chad's just going to grill me with questions and get me to where he really wants me to be. But let's start with this. The headlines. The headlines is really this agenda, what I want to cover today. And I'll tell you 3 things. 1, headlines matter. 2, there is a 3-5-7 rule. You probably never heard of it. You're going to hear about it today. I made it up, but it is based on solid research about messaging and retention and how you make an effective message that then leads people to action, the action that you want. And the 3-5-7 rule is the foundation of success. And you're going to find out that 3 is the magic number. And then that there's always an agenda. There's always an agenda. Sometimes the agenda works for you. Sometimes it doesn't. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you maintain control throughout all of that. I'll make my screen a little bit bigger here. So you may have heard this. This quote, I didn't make it up. I've always believed that if you tell me a fact, I'll learn. Tell me the truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. So you may have heard this, or maybe not, but this was actually said by the Sable brothers. They referred to this as part of the foundation for why they created and what their philosophy was, their whole business model was for NFL films, because NFL films is probably one of the best storytellers there are. They could get people to watch that even if you hate football. There's always a story. You probably saw it a lot in the Olympics. There's always a story. And the story is what makes your messaging live. It's what makes people tell the story that you told them over and over and over again. It is the thing that makes people inspired. So storytelling is a very, very important part of messaging. You guys already know this. I got on your website to take a look at a few things, and I just loved the fact that at the top, at the top line navigation, there was a little link that said stories. That, I bet, is one of the most frequently visited places on your website.
It's funny, traffic to that page nearly doubled when we changed it from from testimonials to stories.
That's right. Testimonials like, yeah. I'm going to hear what you want to take. You're going to tell me this stuff. It's not credible, but stories, that's what people want to hear. And I love what you've done here. You've got, like, these are the headlines. If I don't read anymore, I've already taken away, you guys are a tribe. You support each other. I've already taken away that Outside Agents is the place to go if you want to be successful, because they're going to give you the tools to be successful. And that I'm going to make more money. There's so many more of these. I read through all of them, but I just really, really love all of the different things that, that were in here. I taught in a classroom for 20 years. I was part of a military family. I was a teacher. These kinds of stories that you have in here that support the headlines that are here are what make the headlines work. It's what makes them believable. It's what makes people want to tell other people about it. So I applaud you all. And I'm sorry I couldn't put everybody's story on here, but I really enjoyed reading through it. And I think that it is you already know this. We could probably just turn this off now. You don't need to hear from me. You guys are the headlines. You're creating the headlines. You're making things happen. Now, what do we do when we're going to create message points? Those are also headlines. What happens when you are normally telling a story, though, is that if somebody asks you a question, you start to build up to the headline. What you've done in the way you've structured that page is that you're building up to that headline, but you've put the headline at the top for everybody. This is the basis for the story. So it's very difficult in normal conversation to think, I've got to say my headline first. But this is pretty critical no matter what you're doing. If you really want your messages to resonate, what you want to get across to resonate, to be remembered, to make a difference, and for people to take the action that you want. So, this one is based on the toolkit that we sent out with the restart and the health and safety protocols. And we had our top line messages, and sometimes they change, but they are all very complementary. So one of them is that, we're leading the way. The other one is we remain the most regulated industry. This was something that I put in place because when people started to hear about the CDC program, they got stuck on one word, which I've now taken out of our vocabulary. And that one word was voluntary. Because then all of a sudden people started to look at that to say, oh, voluntary. So, you're not giving the stringent requirements. You're the CDC. So basically they can decide to follow you or not, when we all know that is not true, right? So I took out the word voluntary because that's not even the official name of the program. And I decided to go back to, what is the official name? Let's call it what it is, which is the COVID-19 program for ships operating in U.S. waters. Mouthful, government agency, you're always going to have it. But I might say that the first time, and they'll say the program, we're enrolled in the program. Because I want to get away from the simple lie of the word voluntary.
Hannah, I love what you did there. I've got a question for you, because you nailed it on the head. In basic sales, we always, what's in it for me, right? And I feel, and I don't know if this is what you did intentionally, but it seems like you took, you are required, that's taking something from somebody, their freedom. And voluntary, you put in a position where they were giving something. Mm-hmm. They were contributing. They were gaining social value by doing it. Was that what you were literally trying to do, is switch that association?
Well, I wanted to switch the association by saying we enrolled in the program versus saying we enrolled in a voluntary program. That was the key thing, because when the word voluntary started to be used, then it was like, oh, well, they're giving us a gift. And that's not a good thing in the minds of travelers. They looked at it like we could take it or leave it. So we wanted to put on, rather than talking about the CDC, is to say cruising remains the most regulated sector in travel, even after the expiration of the conditional sailing order. This is, and even with this program. So this is not a voluntary program, because it really isn't a voluntary program. And instead focus on what the cruise protocols have been. And then if you dig through the messaging and as you see the supporting points, you'll find that one thing that we reinforce is that these were protocols the cruise industry created. The cruise industry is leading the way. The cruise industry has the proof points. The cruise industry is the industry you can trust. And this is what you guys do with your headlines about your own agents and your own business. Give
I
a reason.
love what you did there in the language, where not one of those headlines has anything about science. But you mentioned, I think, 7 times in the body of it. So it was just kind of an implicit reinforcement of your statement, right? It was giving it parenthetical validity without having to say science, 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 because that was having a certain reaction out in the market space. That's remarkable how you kind of made it well, factual without beating them in the head with these are facts, these are facts, these are facts. It was just
a message first. Yep. And here's the madness. Here's the message. There's a method behind the madness that you talked about, Chad. And that is, if you think about it, your headlines are your subjective statement that people could come in behind and say, oh yeah, prove it.
Okay.
Headline. If your headline that somebody could come in afterwards and say, oh yeah, prove it, then you've got a good headline. Now, you don't have a good headline if you can't prove it. So you need to make sure your headlines are proof driven, that they're fact driven, but the facts don't need to overtake that headline, because people don't connect to that. People don't connect to facts. Going back to stories, the feeling. But so give them a reason. And by the way, what do you salespeople all love?
Stories.
Which I'll tell you, this is what I learned about sales. This is okay. I'm not a salesperson. I can sell a message point. I can use my words to be influential. But what I loved hearing when I first was learning about sales was that you love objections. Why do you love objections? It gives a reason to have the conversation. So it's like, oh yeah, prove it. If somebody gives you an objection, they've said they're interested.
Yeah, I love that. If they are going to take the time to refute what you said, then they have to, by definition, they're interested.
Yeah, my mother told me a long time ago, very long time ago, because clearly this was a long time ago, like in high school and in college. She said to me, if a boy is interested in you and you're not interested in the boy, don't come up with an excuse like, or even if it is the truth, to say, I have a boyfriend. What she said, what you've just told the person is you're interested, but right now you're not available. So now they have a reason to overcome that objection. Just say, I'm.
I think your mom and my mom would have gotten along great, because my mom always told me that a boy chases a girl until she catches him.
Yeah, well, we're very good at that. So you've seen the headlines here, but Chad, one thing that you just mentioned was, I didn't use the word science here, but the science is in the proof points. You have to be able to have the facts to back it up. And so when I talk about this, and I'll show you how we use that, is 3, 5,
and
7
you're breaking up
rule.
just a little bit there.
Okay. On.
Okay, you got a little technical difficulty there. Let's see if that clears itself up here. You may, if you can hear me, Ann, you may have to leave the session and come back.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, but I'm not seeing you move.
Okay.
I think we're getting better. Okay, so
Come back.
she's having just a little bit of trouble there, and maybe log out and log back in, see if that resets your connection. In the meantime,
okay.
Oh, we're coming through a little bit. Hold on. She's moving. Yay. Okay. We can see things. And if we can hear you, we're in business. No, she's restarting. So folks, I want to talk a little bit about that 357. I want you to understand something. We did not review this ahead of time, but I'm going to guess that she's going to give you at least 3 reasons why you should be using the 357. If you ever want to sound like you know what you're talking about when you don't, just tell people that you have 3 reasons for whatever it is and start talking. If you say those reasons ahead of time, it makes you look like an expert. So, hey, we're going to look at this problem in terms of what happened, what's happening, and what's going to happen, right? I don't even know what I'm talking about, but I can talk about what happens now. But it sounds organized. It sounds authoritative. And a lot of what I like about Anne and her approach to things is the way that she makes the hard stuff digestible. She gets out there to the point, backs it up. She doesn't have to tell you how smart she is. She's got people to back her up. And that's just assumed by the consumer of the information.
Okay, I hope you can hear me now.
Because of the way she presents the information. So yes, Anne, we're back. I just made a wild guess about what 357 is.
Okay.
I was right.
Okay, all right. Well, I didn't hear what it was, so we'll see. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen now. Let's get that back. So can you see that?
It's coming up.
Am I back in?
We're not seeing your screen yet.
Over here?
Okay, I can see you now. Hit your screen share. I think we'll be in business.
Okay. Should be up there. Let's try it again. Share.
There we go.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's see. So 357. Now, I told you you're going to hear a little bit about my son, Ryan, who's 31 now. But when Ryan was a little boy, I said to him, I should have put your name on your birth certificate 3 times. Because as a little boy, I'd say, Ryan, Ryan, Ryan. So he would finally answer. So 3 times, 3 different ways before somebody hears you. It's not just true for my kid. It is, you have to say something 3 times, 3 different ways before somebody hears you. Now, 5 times, 5 different ways before they believe you. They actually believe before you have credibility about this. And then 7 times, 7 different ways before they actually do what you want them to do. So it can be an action. It could be you've changed their mind. It could be to buy something. It could be to go somewhere. It could be to stop doing something. It's what your desired action is. But you have to have consistency and credibility. And then this 357 repetition. So without that, you know, you're not, it won't be compelling. It won't be memorable. It won't be credible. You have to have something said, repeated. You know, don't you just love it when somebody says to you, well, I sent you an email on that. It's once and done is never going to happen. And I'm sure that when you sell things, it doesn't always happen that first time.
And it's funny, we just in our last meta session talked about in our last meta session, which is one of my little kind of one-on-one sessions with people, talked about implicit cognition. So this doesn't have to be an overt thing. I don't have to say, buy a cruise, buy a cruise, buy a cruise. What you said was you have to say it 3 different ways. And so in that meta session, we talked about implicit cognition, peripheral consumption. So if you're there and you're seeing nice images, and then your message resonates with that image, and then maybe a video comes along, bang, now they're familiar with you. Now they might be willing to start to consider to believe you, and so on and so forth. So I love that approach.
Yeah. And it also doesn't have to be just from you. So it's really important, though, that you have people that can back it up. So it could be that, you know, somebody makes us, presents a possibility, a travel possibility. Maybe somebody else comes in behind them. Maybe you send a story from one of your other customers about why they had such a great time doing the exact itinerary or a similar itinerary that you just recommended. I'm not going to pretend to be a salesperson. I'm not. But you can have other people help tell your story. And that's one of your 3 different ways, and your 5 different ways, and then your 7 different ways. And that also means that it doesn't have to stop after the sale. So you get somebody interested, they go on the trip, they travel. Now it's time to follow up with them, reinforce the experience that they just had. Reinforce for them so that they know there were special things you got done for them as part of that trip. Remind them of why they chose you. So
And
these
help them share that. One of the most successful agents we have, what he does is this. He keeps that story going. He solicits pictures after people's trips and says, hey, I'll give you a $50 onboard credit on your next trip or whatever if you send me a few pictures. So now that becomes that third-party validation of the information that the agent knows what they're doing. It's implicit, it's peripheral because you just scroll past the image. But I don't know if you guys know this, but to scroll past something, you have to see it. Okay, so it's being seen, it's being reinforced 3, 5, 7. So the story keeps on going.
So the customer journey, and it's, the words are different depending on who you talk to, but it's really kind of, I'm considering a trip, I'm searching for a trip, now I'm planning the trip, then I travel on the trip, now it's time to share. And usually travelers need your help in sharing, but you can also then use that opportunity to reinforce, why did they choose you? You did that. Now, just so you know, when you did that, we made this happen, or we had this, you enjoyed that wine that was in your room, whatever it might be. Just remind them of what you did for them that made it special. Reinforce the reason that they chose you. Reinforce their decision. We have to do this with a lot of people. Cruisers love to cruise, but we have to constantly remind them why they keep cruising. So now I told you that I would talk about 3 being the magic number. So 3 is a magic number because think about it. It's the most stable number. It's the most beautiful kind of element when you're building a house and you're looking at architectural design. You actually only need 3 legs of a stool for it to be stable. But more importantly, it's easy to remember 3 things more than 5 things. It's easier than 5 things. And it's easier for other people to remember them and to share them. So the 3 is really, really important because it's much easier to go through. I'm going to share this with you. I'm going to share this with you. I'm going to share this with you. But people are always going, now, what was that 4th thing I wanted to tell you? What was that 5th thing? That 3 is the magic number. It is the most stable, memorable, consistent, credible number you can get. And by the way, you'll notice that all those numbers are prime numbers. They are important numbers. They stand on their own.
And interestingly enough, in the brain, just real quick, in the brain, we don't remember everything. We think we do. We don't. But the brain works in what's called chunks. And the magic number in that chunk is 5 plus or minus 2. That's why it's easy to remember a local phone number and harder to remember a long distance one. That extra digit doesn't fit well with our cognitive processing of information, the way that we manage it. So that 357 makes so much sense. It's not even funny. It's really important information.
I'll tell you, when I started I started a consultancy, and when I left an organization, they said to me, well, what are you going to call it? And I said 357. And everybody at that organization knew exactly why. They said, oh, that's perfect, because they know the story. They know what 357 rule is. All right, now 3 is the magic number that we talked about. Here's the other thing that happens, though. You have to be very compelling in that headline statement. And again, you have to have the facts, because here's what happens. The public will always believe the truth.
Wow, so true.
In the about how responsible the tourism choice comes complexity about the science, and then we have this, and we've got CO2, and we mitigate that. Like, okay, I don't care. You're not giving me what I need to know. So this is why the headlines are very, very important, and why the headlines will always require a prove it, but that's okay, because we have the proof points, and that will tell you that you have a good headline. So again, top line messages, each one of these things has a supporting set of facts. So I like to use 3 as the magic number. I always have at least three top line messages, but that's usually what I work on it from a structure standpoint. Whether I'm giving a speech, I'm going to have a conversation, I'm talking to media. I start with those 3 headline messages, and then each one of those message points has at least three supporting points. But I try to keep it to the 3-3-3 rule because it's easier for me to remember it. And plus, I stay focused. If you only tell them what you tell them, that's all they're going to hear. And that usually is what you want them to hear. So I subscribe to this, the 3-3-3 rule. So as an example, if my top line messaging is Cruise leads the way, then I have to have points behind that. So if we say we lead the way in health and safety and the best way to see the world, then I have to have the supporting points. And so, my supporting points are not my lead to say the incidence of COVID-19 is lower. It's a fraction of what's on land. That's my proof point, not my headline. People will get lost in that data. We lead the way. COVID is a fraction on a cruise ship compared to land. More than 6 million people have sailed in nearly 90 markets. And that was even before there was a vaccine. And I've got a survey that'll tell you 96% of people that went on a cruise ship said they really felt safe and they would sail again under those same circumstances.
That's the key right there too. They felt because safe. They didn't decide they were safe. They didn't come to the conclusion they were safe. They felt safe.
Yep. It's always that emotional connection. Mm-hmm. It's the emotional connection. And also, we get asked a lot, why can't you just send out a marketing campaign or something that says cruising is safe? Well, first of all, the lawyers won't let us because they see walking by a tree as a dangerous proposition that could fall on you, right? Nothing safe. But I've always said to people that safety is not something you can promote or promise because there's too many unknowns. What you can do is say, cruising is one of the few places where people can feel confident, and then fill in your blanks there. Now, Chad wanted me to talk about a toolkit. One of the things that we do to help people 7 different ways is to provide ideas and ask them. For the most part, we'd like to provide people these kinds of digital cards that don't have the CLIA branding because it's called white labeling, because that allows you to put your own branding on it if you wish, or just go with it or create something similar. So they're really thought starters, but they are kind of turnkey in that you don't need to create something. And then what happens with these, they'll provide you some ideas on what to then write in your post when you're doing social media. We also provide FAQs and media message points. If you have a media interview, for example, if you have the 3-3-3 format of 3 headlines, each with 3 supporting points, I can answer any question that I am asked. Any question. I don't care what they're talking about. Completely different. And the reason is you have to understand there's always an agenda. So this applies to media when you're talking to media, but I would argue that it also applies to any conversation that you have. I've told people when I do media training, this really isn't media training, it's communications training. You can use this with your children, with your spouse, with your partner, with your friends, with your brother, with your sister, with your dog and your cat. Because it's very important then you understand what they need to hear and what questions they might be asking. But with the media, there's always an agenda. There's usually the headline or the intro, it's called the lead, that is already written, and you're just there to help prove their point that they've already decided. And a lot of people fall into that trap. So again, while I'm talking about media here, it is something that can be used in virtually any conversation that you have. And the way you answer any question that anybody asks you is by using these techniques: headlining, highlighting, bridging, initiating, and using examples. So headlining is what we've already talked about. Start with the message you want to be heard, then get into your proof points. Highlighting is to get their attention. Now, what I'm about to say is really, really important. That was an example of highlighting. You capture somebody's attention by telling them, listen to this. Politicians like to use it a lot, but they'll say, they start with look, and then they say something. All right, I do not advise using the word look, because I have found that whenever I hear the word look from a politician, I am convinced they're going to tell me a lie. So I like to give people examples of highlighting that you can use that are beyond the look. So one is, now, if you only remember one thing, another highlighting is, this is really important. Another highlighting is, I'm only going to say this once. Another highlighting can be pausing for a moment.
Oh, I love that. The dramatic pause is one of the most powerful things, especially in public speaking. You just say something and let it hang there for a minute. You know, that pause is so powerful. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Now, what if whomever you're speaking to, and again, it doesn't have to be a member of the media, it could be anybody, has not asked you a question that you want to ask, or they ask you a question you don't want to answer. This is why the 3-3-3 rule works, because you can bridge away from a question and go to where you want to talk about something. So if somebody were to ask me something that I don't want to talk about that, or it's not going to support my agenda for what I want to get across, the example would be, somebody asked me a question, well, tell me how many people have, come off of a cruise ship and they just really hated the food. A more important issue is this. Let's talk about and then I will talk about what I want to talk about. A more important issue is this. How much thought goes into the menus? How many choices are available on a cruise ship? So there's different kinds of things you can do. You just bridge away from the question that was asked, because it usually has its agenda and its assumption in it, and talk about what you want to talk about. So bridging are things like, a more important issue is, well, what you have to really remember is, this is what I can tell you. Another example is to say, I think what you're asking is this. Now that's part of initiating, as well as bridging. You rephrase their question to what you want it to be. Oftentimes people want to say something to get your ire up so that you'll repeat the negative. So yes. This is where bridging is very, very important. And initiating. So initiating can occur. You can ask the question yourself. One thing you haven't brought up is this, and then you can talk about it. Another way to initiate is by, go ahead, answer the question that was asked of you, and then add on to it. So I'll answer the question and say, but there's another thing I want to bring up here that I think is really important to remember. And so just initiate. And then using examples, that's your kind of storytelling technique. Somebody
breaking up just a little bit there.
Oh, this is a great ship. You know what? Never cruise ever. Okay. Am I coming back?
Yeah, now you're back.
Okay. All right. So the storytelling is an option, is an opportunity there.
And just real quick, Ann, I wanted to jump in. So a few weeks ago, I got interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, right? The guy comes out of the gates with, hi, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Who are you? Okay, went through that. And he goes, so, just to get to the crux of the matter, how do you resolve in your mind profiting from risking people's lives? You can imagine how quick I flipped that. I explained to the gentleman, yeah, there are a number of threats in this world. Going to the grocery store is dangerous. There's a lot of threats in the world. I'd argue chief among them would be misinformation. And so let's take a look at that. Okay. And it turned into a good interview because I engaged. I called his, BS, right? And turned it on him just a little bit, but still kept him in the conversation. I initiated a new conversation. And got that bridge from where he was to where I needed to be. It was nothing but dumb luck, but it worked out good for me.
I think it was more than that. But Chad, that's exactly right. So, what you caught up on, so that again, there's always an agenda. Part of the agenda is the trick question. And so you got the trick question and you were able to identify that and bridge away from it. So, there are things like, assumptions that are made. There's the A or B dilemma, which is, well, would you recommend people do this or do that? Should they believe this or should they believe that? Well, first of all, there's not just A or B answers. Here's what they should believe, and then give the answer. You don't have to take what the person is serving to you as the only answers or responses to the question. And by the way, I like to say responses versus answers, because I don't always have to answer that question, but I can provide a response.
Real quick on the A/B dilemma. So guys, this is a huge problem in social media today. It's one of the downsides of it. If you ever watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix, you'll kind of pick up on it. But we've become so polarized. We keep on trying to ask binary questions, yes or no questions that are not binary issues. Are you for safety or not? Well, that's not a yes or no question. I wrote an article called "They Called Me Purple" because somebody, said, are you a Republican or Democrat? Red or blue? I thought it over. I said, I'm purple, man. Okay. So A and B don't always exist, but it's a simple trick that the media will use with you and your friends and peers on social media to pigeonhole you. Be very careful with those kind of questions. And when you call them out on that, you say it's not possible to answer that question with yes or no. Let me explain why you just bridged that, initiated a new direction, and took control of that conversation.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's kind of fun to be able to, once you start to, really practice these kinds of things and you hear them. And again, it's not just from media. It could be from your friends and family, and it could be from your customers. But you'll start to identify them. And the inconsistency trap is another one. And it could be, well, it was before this, the cruise line said that they would do this, but now they're not doing that. That's right. First of all, more information can become available.
Yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead. This drives me nuts right now.
more information can become available that say, yeah, that was then. And you know what? Since then, here's a perfect place for it is all those cruise ships at the beginning of the pandemic, they stayed in that, people just had to get stuck on those ships and they couldn't get off. And that's right. And we're saying that the ships had to stay in port, that nobody could get off. But thank goodness that the health authorities have learned more based on the science, based on that, and now they're starting to see how cruising is leading the way in the right kinds of protocols. But because now they're not making people stay on a ship, but we wanted to get across the fact that wasn't the cruise lines, right? That the cruise lines were following the directions of the health authority at the time, and thank goodness that the health authorities have learned a lot more about this virus. And then we can continue, and we continue on. The absent party question is one that where the person's not there, but they're going to ask a question about, well, what do you think? Let's say they're asking about outside agents and they want to compare you to another agency. Well, what do you think ABC Travel would do about this? Okay, first of all, the ABC is not there. You're not going to speak for them. And so always the answer to that question is, that's something you'd probably have to ask them. But what I can tell you what we're committed to is this. And then the loaded premise one is the one that you already had, Chad, which is, about, why don't you do this? How do you feel about putting all these people in
clients? Yeah.
When you stop hitting your dog, kicking your dog kind of stuff. And then there's the big if, and the big if is always a hypothetical situation. Also something to stay away from a media standpoint, especially. We don't get into hypotheticals, we get into facts. And so, that's speculation, but it's a hypothetical situation. But what I can tell you is a real life situation.
There you go.
And then
back to the story. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So that's kind of the method behind what there's a lot more part of a media training, a full day media training, but there is more I'm happy to share with you separate from this so that you can read up a little bit more on it. And happy to take anybody's calls at any time if you've got a situation where you need some support, particularly if you've got a media opportunity. Or if you're just in a situation where you're like, I don't know how to answer this question.
That is amazingly valuable, folks. Look, we never abuse our vendor partners, but if you need a hand, she's legit. Give me a call. We'll talk everything through. At the end of the day, guys, okay, so we're talking about a global communication that was of a certain nature. But these premises are so applicable in your day-to-day lives, your day-to-day business life. I don't care if you have 2 clients in Hope. Okay, the concepts behind it is really important. And the storytelling, anytime you can make it personal, it becomes more real. And if I can tie emotions to that, I win. I've been saying this for 2 decades. When I do public speaking, I'm going to make you laugh, cry, or I'm going to piss you off, but you will remember me.
You will remember, Chad, and you will remember the stories you've told, because Chad, I've already told the story, or actually it's just a little saying that you shared last time we spoke, and I've already told 3 people. So 3's already done. I'm sure you've already done the 5 and 7 of this, but I loved sharing your explanation. I think you said your father said that the difference between being smart and being intelligent is smart is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and intelligence is knowing not to put it on your fruit salad.
I love that. But my gramps had some cool little sayings like that, but it's true. And it's funny that you bring that up, because there is some wisdom involved here. What is the messaging is very important. How we're going to communicate it is just as important. So on that global stage, there was a certain avatar, a certain entity in your mind that you were communicating with. It had to be broad and it had to be globally defined. But we also need to look at our customers too. Look, there's times, I use words like cool and damn and, just stuff like I'm a teenager all day, every day. And I'll do it in a professional environment. According to the Wharton School study back in 98, excuse me, C-level executives that curse are 58% more likely to be believed by their subordinates. The idea is that, they're being real. They're showing you under the hood. They're being, authentic. And that's important. So I'm not telling you to drop F-bombs in your, marketing or anything like that, but talk like you talk, and talk like you would talk to that person or that entity. One of the worst things you can have happen in communication, and I think you'll agree, is Creepy Valley. Creepy Valley is y'all remember the Polar Express? The reason that movie flopped is because it was almost perfect, and that weirds us out. It's like you were saying about truths, believe a complex lie. It was just too close to being real. So if you're going to be authentic and be consistently so. People pick up on that quick. Man, that goes back to social evolution. Back in the day, cavemen, if there was something just a little off about Krog or whatever his name was, you didn't hang out with him, period. It was a survival thing. So authenticity and communicating and knowing what it sounds like when you are being authentic is important. And there's that dramatic pause I like so much. There was a quick question though. And one of our agents asked, what is the difference between headlining and highlighting?
Okay, so headlining is your message point. Headlining is start with that headline. The most important thing, if you can only say one thing. So, let's use an example. Chad, I'm going to ask you a question. If you had to say one thing about the agents that are part of this Outside Agents network team, what is the one thing you want people to know about them?
About our team, the inside, we're cool people. Seriously,
there
I
you
use
go.
the word cool on purpose because I use that word all the time. It's authentic, and cool has a very specific definition to mean. If you're not cool, you don't work for me.
And so that's your headline. Now, and then your proof points would be. So your proof come under that they're cool because
You're breaking up a bit, but I think you're asking about proof points. I would use our
The
surveys, the
feeling that
awards.
they're all very positive things about this
Okay.
team.
I use this all the time. I challenge people. Call us at, like, you're getting ready to sign up. Call us up on a given Tuesday, afternoon at 5:45, and ask to talk to the owner. See if I pick up. That's my proof. I make a question which begs an action, doesn't it? It works like a charm.
And so the highlighting, then your headline is they're cool. Highlighting would be, you know what? I want you to know one really important thing about our team. They're cool. So that what I said beforehand is the highlight. It's an attention grabber. It's a signal. Listen to what I have to say. It's going to be really important. It's that thing you remember when you were in school, when the teacher would say, this is going to be on the test.
And so that highlighting it. So I used to do some stand-up. Obviously I wasn't very good at it. But reincorporation in comedy is an extremely effective tool. And I think you're kind of describing parts of it. But if I crack a joke in the first 10 minutes of a set, and towards the end, if they haven't, thrown me off stage yet, I can make a reference to that joke without explicitly saying so. Then that joke is funnier.
Yep.
Look at some of the greats in comedy history. Carlin was a master of it. Robin Williams, another one. But bringing the reincorporating through the use of your highlights to reinforce the headline is the goal, right? To support that.
And it's part of the 3-5-7 rule. So you said it again, right? I mean, it's anytime you're repeating something, you're saying it in a different way, in a different context, providing a different point of time, that is reinforcing, and that will help people remember.
And that, at the end of the day, we're kind of coming to the end, is the key. Folks, I don't know if you know this, but when you read, you don't look at letters. You see shapes and we recognize them. The same is true in verbal communication and visual communication. We're looking for things that we recognize so we can chunk them down and store them. So instead of having 35 things, we have 5 groups of 7 in our brain. Okay. You want to make sure that in each of those chunks of retention, that you've put something specific there for them to retain. It's that anchor point in memory that allows us to expand those points back out. So we condense 7 points into one, called that a chunk. When we see that photograph, or we smell that cake my grandma used to cook, or whatever else, that cues up those other 6 points of information. So you use highlighting and headlining to resonate with your client, to make that that communication vibrant, to make it vivid. Vivid means alive. Okay. And that's the trick. And what is alive? It's when you emotionally connect to it. So I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I really appreciate what you've done here. I love how you wrote this. And let me kind of tell you what I took away from your cruise health messaging kit, which, by the way, is available in the media center in MagTap. And we've also posted it for a limited time in the Facebook group, which you can have access to. But one of the things I really liked about what you did here was the way you balanced more complex words with simpler messaging. So when you started using words like protocol, you started to, instead of saying protocols, you would say measures. Mm-hmm. You would make the assertion that it's highly regulated even after the order was taken back. So you talk about this heavy thing, regulations, and then you say, hey, you make it not a big thing. We're already doing that. Okay. It's something we do every day, and moved along. And so you would kind of stab the beast, back up, let it snarl for a second, and then get back in there. And you reincorporated the factual foundations implicitly 7 times in there. I took away from that they know what they're doing. I don't know what to do, but they do. And for me, the fact that it's evolving was critical. You referenced in there the evolving nature of this. So you're setting the expectation that it's not static. So as that messaging evolves, right, they're receptive to it.
And it gives you an opportunity to follow back up with people, so I want to clarify one thing, because I did see one thing in the, I think it was one of the first questions in the chat was, is it 3 times and then you got to do it 5 more times and then 7 more times? It's, you know, it's really about getting to 7. Doesn't hurt to do 3 and then add 5 and then add 7, but it's really about getting to that 7 point. You know, so the 3 times, and then you got to do it 2 more times, and then you've got to do it 2 more times after that. That's the minimum.
You know, it's funny. We do the MAG MMS, which is a managed email marketing system. And we've got agents that have all kinds of opinions. You know, contacting clients once a week is too often. Some may just want to contact them every 15 minutes. Some are only when something amazing happens and stuff like that. Frequency matters, but not in the way that you think. That 357 doesn't have to happen in 5 minutes. In fact, I would say that as we get to the 7, maybe stretching out that frequency just a bit might be to your advantage in some circumstances. So the trick is to just keep on repeating it. It's you want, let me see if I can kind of sum up what I'm trying to say. You want, through your communications, to create a state, a mental state in your clients, such that they are receptive to taking the action you want. You're priming them. You're getting them ready to take the action. I'm not going to make anybody do anything, but I will be there when you're ready to do something. And I'm going to try to prime you to do the thing that I want you to do. That's the trick. So having said that, folks, again, Anne, I really appreciate you coming on in here. Folks, she's a really important lady. She took her time out voluntarily to come on in here and share the method behind the madness. And so from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you, number one. Number two, the material she created is available for you in the Media Center and in Facebook. And real quick, if I can just show you, I'm going to leave you with something kind of embarrassing. Just real quick. Embarrassing is such a strong word.
God, I hope this isn't a picture.
So this is one of your messages. And I put this over it because I'm a goofball. People know I'm a goofball. This is my Halloween costume, by the way. And I was tired of masks. Okay. I use this and I got 3 times more click-throughs in my fake account. You know, I kind of go out there and play like I'm a travel agent than any other COVID related post I made. I think it's because I just kind of made a joke out of it. Not a joke. I liked it up a little bit, you know. Now, I can tell you this. There's about 3/4 of people in this meeting right now who are dying knowing that I posted this. They would never ever do. But it's authentic. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a goofball. So sometimes we use emotions in different ways, right, to elicit a response. In this case, I just wanted people to kind of calm down a little bit so they might hear the other messaging. So folks, having said that and left you with this indelible image in your mind, I want to thank everybody again for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you in our next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.